Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Student Leadership in School Food webinar, co-hosted by Food for All NB and Nourish Nova Scotia. We want to first acknowledge the lands from which we work, play, and receive nourishment as the unceded and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, and Passamaquoddy nations. As treaty people, we all have the responsibility to understand and honor the agreements made by our ancestors. My name is Geneviève. I am the Interim Network Manager at Food for All NB. For those who don't know us, we are a provincial bilingual organization that envisions a New Brunswick that is informed, connected, and engaged in food security for all. We support food movements in New Brunswick through resource sharing, networking, and partnership building. Our core offerings include the Community Food Mentor Program, a New Brunswick Food Programs map, resource directory, monthly newsletters, and our newly added school food landing page. Ways to connect or follow us have been added to the chat, so please do not hesitate to reach out. We have reserved space for questions towards the end of the session today, so please drop any thoughts, comments, questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can. Staff are also here to support if you have tech issues, so use the chat box for that as well. This session is being recorded and will be available on the Nourish YouTube channel.
Hello, I'm Lisa Roberts. I'm the Executive Director of Nourish Nova Scotia, and it's a real pleasure to be just set to learn from folks who are in the work of ensuring nourishment of children and youth in our school settings. So Nourish Nova Scotia is a provincial nonprofit and a charitable organization that has a mission of working alongside communities and schools to support the healthy nourishment of children and youth. We've been doing that work for 10 years. And hosting webinars is something relatively new for us, but we're always so inspired, and we always are so grateful to learn from folks in different locations in this work. And so that's what has kind of provoked us to play the role of sharing those learnings and hopefully also sharing some of that inspiration by inviting people to learn with us. So today the focus is on youth leadership, student leadership, and we're going to start off with a conversation with Shali Manuel, a youth engagement coordinator with Uplift. Not every school region in Nova Scotia is lucky to have Uplift staff, but some do, and we are watching their work on youth engagement with great interest. So Shali, can you start out by introducing yourself a little bit and then introducing Uplift?
So I'm Shali Manuel. I'm based out of Truro, Nova Scotia. I work for Uplift and Public Health, and I'm supporting schools in Chignecto's Central Regional Centre for Education, or CCRCE. And I've been in my role for about 4 years.
And what is the goal, the work of Uplift?
So Uplift is a school university community partnership, and it's a lot of the funding comes from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and then there's a funding consortium of the IWK, the QE2, Dalhousie Medical Research Foundation, and then a lot of private donations. And so the partnership is funded for 5 years. There's a core team in Nova Scotia, and then there are myself and 7 other people in the youth engagement coordinator role across Nova Scotia. So really, it's an arm of health promoting schools work, or healthy school communities, or in Cape Breton it's called Blossom. So this work has been happening for close to 20 years in Nova Scotia, but in my experience, for a lot of it, it's been a lot of adults having a lot of meetings discussing what would be great for kids in schools. And so it's this role was really designed to have people go into the schools and create opportunities for student voice and student leadership. And a big way that we do that is that we have a one-time $5,000 grant for the schools that are participating in Uplift. And so, for example, in CCRCE, we have just over 60 schools. So over 4 years, there's 2 of us in my role. So I have 2 counties, my colleague has 2 counties, and then each year we put out a call for expression of interest. Schools can sign up, and then we go in and we either will help form a student leadership team, or we'll work with an existing team during COVID, we worked with a lot of full classes because they weren't allowed to mix and mingle as much. So it really is quite adaptable, flexible. It's looked a lot of different ways. But essentially, we do some team building with the students, and then we we'll often do an in-depth assessment of the school environment, looking at enablers and barriers to health within food, within play spaces, indoor space. We look at relationships, all of those sorts of things. And then we will look at all that and help kind of identify some priority areas. And then the student leadership team will kind of shortlist some project ideas. Often we'll take it back to the full school and then settle on something. So sometimes that's something of one project that takes all $5,000, and sometimes it's a series of little projects, and sometimes the $5,000 is just seed money that then leverages for all these other grants for larger projects. So it's been really exciting work.
And how much interest in food do you see in those interactions with schools?
Tons. Yeah. So if I could say there's one clear theme, is that kids love to be involved with food. They like to make food. They like to eat food. They like to share food. They like to advocate for food. It's interesting because in general, it's kind of a blank slate when we get there. So they can pick, we're very lenient with the definition of healthy and happy schools. So it's whatever, when you're in part of the school community, what kind of things could help support well-being. And there's just, especially I have found since COVID restrictions have lifted, because for a lot of the past 4 years, we've been working in quite restricted situations. But this year is my first full year with no lockdowns. And I just feel like there's been an explosion of cooking clubs, smoothie clubs, salad bar, there's a huge interest in food.
Can you give maybe us one example of initiative that you've seen work out?
It's hard to pick one, to be honest. Definitely, I would say the cooking clubs and smoothie clubs, and sometimes those things go together. Sometimes they're kept separate. But for example, last year at Central Colchester Junior High, there were some students as part of Citizenship 9, their service learning project wanted to start a smoothie bar. And then it was in the spring, so there wasn't a lot of time with it. But then there's 3 grade 9 students that took over it this year. And when I say took over, they own this. And they're making smoothies 2 times a week, and they're serving it as part of the breakfast program. But now they're grocery shopping, they're budgeting, they're really loving it. And the students, the smoothies are hugely popular with the school as well.
That's amazing. So, one barrier that we've heard about when it comes to youth and students working to support school food offerings is a lack of school staff available to supervise. What workarounds, what solutions to that have you seen?
So that definitely can be a barrier. So often there is a adult at the school that we can loop in. So sometimes at Central Colchester Junior High, it's a combination of a Citizenship 9 teacher and a family studies teacher who kind of have direct connections through their courses to that. But sometimes it's an African Nova Scotian student support worker. A lot of times we have Schools Plus staff or child and youth care practitioners, which are part of the Schools Plus team, because their time's a little bit more flexible. But there's a lot of schools especially if it's an after-school cooking club, finding staff has been very tricky. And so part of my role is to help find those community connections. So we've actually been having really great time with there's someone named Ashley Swan who works with the Colchester Food Bank. So she independently got federal funding to support school-based work. So she's been a huge asset. So she's kind of hopping across many different schools, and she can take care of the grocery shopping and a lot of those time-consuming things. And then at a lot of schools, what they'll do is loop in a mystery chef, so that one staff person doesn't have to take on the full commitment of every week sort of thing. And so it might be this week is the math teacher is going to be our mystery chef, or next week's going to be the science teacher. And so it's a great way for teachers or staff to come in, build relationships with students, be part of the fun, but also not feel overcommitted. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And so as you're looking ahead, what do you see on the horizon? Where do you see this food work kind of fueled by student and youth interest? Where do you see the potential of that going?
I think there's a lot of potential to kind of upscale. So this year has really been a lot of grassroots cooking clubs. And we also have no cooking clubs because some schools just don't have the kitchen space. So it's just things that could be made in a classroom with like waffle makers, blenders, like independent pieces of equipment sort of thing. So I would love actually working with Nourish to try to take some of the learnings and make it as easy as possible. I find often if there's like a toolkit or something. So I know our public health nutritionist has made an awesome resource that has all kinds of recipes and things that would all meet the provincial school food nutrition policy. In CCRCE, we have a policy where food needs to be procured through one provider, Armstrong's, but then she just took kind of that extra step. She matches the ingredients with the codes to order them. So I feel like we as a support team can take away a lot of the time consuming pieces and package that up and then share that back. And so that we're able to expand upon this and even some of the learnings in terms of building those community partnerships, to share that. And so it doesn't seem so daunting for people to sign on to it. So I think for my role, I see a lot of programming support, but I think at a larger level, Uplift has an advisory committee that has representation from the Department of Education and a lot of the key players. So I'd like to think my dream would be to have things built right into the curriculum because there's so many. I think we often think about school food being matched with courses like healthy living or family studies or things that are like a direct connection with food, but I feel like you can meet so many math outcomes, so many English language arts outcomes. Like I had to take a smoothie recipe one time. The school had asked me, they ran out of time. So they were asking if I could help just upscale it so that you could take like a family size smoothie recipe to a class size. And trying to do those fractions, the math, I was like, this is a good math lesson for somebody. And I've seen schools get really creative with doing taste testing, blind taste testing, but then writing about describing the food. There's just so many outcomes. So I would love to see some leadership in terms of, I still don't know how things actually work their way into a curriculum guide or the whole process of that, but I would love it if I was a math teacher new in the system, that I would have those, it would be easy for me to have those ideas and inspiration of how I can meet those outcomes. And then also if the province or the region could help to support some professional development. And a lot of this work I find in health promotion is cross-pollination. There's so many wonderful things happening everywhere. And a lot of times it's just like being a little bumblebee and just spreading the stories from one place to the other. So
well, that's a great segue because really that's what we're trying to do with this webinar. And so it seems like a good time to bring into the spotlight Christiana Steves and Karen from Northumberland Regional High School. So we have an educator from New Brunswick, and we have an educator from New Brunswick, from Nova Scotia, and one from New Brunswick. Christiana, do you want to start off by introducing yourself and a bit of how you ended up being interested in food in your educator life?
Sure. So my name is Christiana Steves. I teach social studies and French to grades 7 and 8 at Marshy Middle School. I've been here for about 4 years, and I guess a piece of the cooking started out of the residual COVID guidelines where we had to keep our classes separate because we used to run we're currently running it again, but we ran this program called Engage where there was some choice in activities that students could choose one afternoon a week. And for a while we had to do it with our class because we couldn't cross with other groups. And so I chose to cook with one of my classes and make lasagnas and teach them how to do that. And putting 25 kids in one kitchen was a lot. But I just decided, we need to try these things and we'll deal with problems as they arise. And that kind of snowballed into a lunch cooking program where we started serving hot lunches once a week based on those initial lasagnas that we made. Because now we need to do something with them. So we served them at lunchtime. And so I've always sort of done a little bit of cooking all throughout my teaching career. I even ran an after school program when I was a supply teacher at one point. But it just came, there was a need for food. So
Thanks, Christiana. And Karen, can I turn it to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your school and food journey?
Sure. Just hoping that you can hear me and you'll let me know if you can't. I'm like snuggled up to my laptop computer here in my classroom. Hi, everyone. So good to see the participant list at 38. This is very exciting. Like Shali said, sometimes it feels like you're kind of in it on your own. And I love to hear about the big picture of how people are connecting with, come on in. I have some students actually helping out right now. They're like coming into my classroom now around student leadership and school food. So if you wanted to, you could meet some students who are like volunteer, like literally like this second. Do you want to meet them?
Okay.
Come on over here. Come on over here and say hi to these people. You're talking to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia teachers and support people. You're actually in this camera right here. It's also dress up day at school, so say hi. These are three of my school leaders, and do you want to tell them what you do a little bit?
You know what? We probably won't be able to hear very well, Karen, because they're a distance from the computer.
Okay, come in close. Tell them what you do. Yeah, just say hi.
Hi, we do bin fill up. So we take a cart and we collect our snacks and we go around the school putting them in bins so they're accessible for anybody who needs snacks.
Yeah, that's good. And actually today we had a big donation from our local food bank. We've got a lot of community partners, like Shali had said earlier. Shali and I actually work in the same regional center for education. Oh, do you want to tell them a little bit about our long-term plans and celebrate? Yeah, do you want to go in there? Just chat really close to this mic.
So we're gonna have a greenhouse so we can grow our own veggies so we can make our meals more affordable.
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, we run into one of our biggest barriers, I guess, is really food costs, isn't it? Yeah, we have a big operating budget, and it all started out as a school project, student-led project, and this was 4 years ago now. And these ones are still doing the work as volunteers every single day. Kitty and I were just saying at lunch, like it's hard to explain like to someone who's new in the Karma Closet, like it's every day once you commit to providing food in a food secure way. And but they've risen to the challenge, and it is kind of a challenge, isn't it? Like a big puzzle. Anything you want to say to these folks before they have to go to class, because I've literally like pulled them out of class. They should be in gym right now. Don't tell anyone. Oh my gosh, this is how it all works. Anything else you want to tell them that you like about Karma classes? They like working together. There's like the social piece too. Anyway, anything else you want to say to them before you go? No. Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye. You're inspiring other teachers in other schools. Oh my gosh, this is really how it all works, right? It's all these little pieces together. We got lots of people on the ground helping. So the Karma Closet functions with about 30 to 40 student volunteers, like the three you just met. We have a lot of support from our local community. So I live in a rural area, so a lot of church groups drop off donations for the students. We have a strong social media presence. They put out a wish list of things. And we are also very lucky, like we have Sobeys in our community, and they come across with gift cards for us often. So the food is going, like our grocery costs are going through the roof, and they buy you guys, and they often will try to troubleshoot ways for us to make sure food is accessible in lots of areas that are barrier free. So that was how Karma Closet was born. It was supposed to be food security in a barrier free accessible way. So food was often provided either in the cafeteria at a side window with no cost, or bins of snacks like Lily was telling you at the beginning. And those snacks are available in the library and student services in the main office, and they're available at break times. And we rely a lot on grants, which is what I end up doing a lot of paperwork from my end as a teacher, I never thought I would ever be doing this, talking on seminars around school food, but here we are. And yeah, our big dream is to get our greenhouse up and running for food production. So we just are in the midst of buying our next piece of big equipment. So salad bars are not cheap to buy that equipment. And we think we have a funding partner for that. And that literally just came across my desk like right before this seminar came across. So that was in the CBC yesterday. 5 schools were doing a pilot program. And I was like, we want in on that too, because it seems like it's elementary based. And I don't know, teenagers eat me out of house and home every single day. Oh my gosh, they go through so much food. So anyway, I hope I have answered maybe some of your questions. It is not a one-person job, that's for sure. At this school, we're feeding 880 kids a day, so it's a lot. And it's all hands on deck, and the kids understand that they have to look after each other because one teacher can't do it all. And so that's about it.
Wow. Like we've really caught you in the middle of it. I'm just wondering, Christiana, like is what Karen is talking about, does that resonate with you? The grant writing and yeah.
Well, it's funny, I haven't done any grant writing yet, because when I started doing this, I approached my principal and I was like, how are we funding this? And she kind of just looked at me and goes, we'll find the money. So every time, like, I've gone through this process, like, okay, I need to grocery shop, and I say, like, what's my budget? What will find the money is the answer that I get every time. So it's been a priority for our administration to try and support this program by pulling funds, by fundraising, things like that. We also, similarly, we got a donation from Sobeys as well, which was so helpful. And that like has just been tiding me over. I still have 2 gift cards with like $40 on them. I'm like, okay, maybe we'll make it to the end of the year and these Sobeys gift cards. Yeah, my principal currently, he loves Costco, so he'll go and like get all the deals and things. And so we just try and kind of find a way to make it work. And a lot, because of our breakfast program is through the Food Dépôt Alimentaire, we order a little bit extra just to kind of supplement those snacks and keep us going. And like, at one point we were getting wraps. And so I started making tacos at lunch. And another point, I was able to get a bunch of eggs. I was like, okay, well, we're making breakfast burritos because those freeze really well and are super popular with our students. So I'm just constantly trying to figure out how can I use the ingredients that we're getting donated and used. And for my numbers, I feed we're a school of about 300 and I feed about 50% of the students in a day. So
I'm sorry, what percentage of students in a day?
50% for free. Anyone can come in, and like the idea was all that, like, one of the big barriers was that we used to get bagged lunches, like paper bag lunches, and it was very obvious who was getting the free food. And so that's one of the reasons why we switched up what we were doing, because there's the stigma associated with it. And now it's like, there are kids who walk in with their lunch bag to come get something because they're like, oh, well, I love the yogurt, or I want a bagel today, right? And the idea is it's for everyone. Everyone can access it, because we want to make it clear that there shouldn't be a stigma around being hungry. And to be honest, they're all teenagers who are hungry all the time. Like, right? Even if they had a lunch, we all know they're still hungry. So we just, try to offer them those opportunities to come and get what they need.
So talk to me a little bit about where the leadership is coming from on what? Like when we say student leadership, is it really student leadership, or like, or are we encouraging volunteerism, but they're kind of being directed? Like, talk to me about who's on first?
I can chat about that if you want to.
Go for it, Karen.
I see so many parallels, Christiana, with your work. I'm just so thankful you're there, because I feel like I'm not alone. So this is, so you're at middle school and I'm at high school. So the idea that it's student-led, it's definitely like open at lunchtime on Mondays for organizational and planning team time. So that just means like in this classroom and at lunchtime, if you're interested in food security, you can come. So what happens, I find a lot of times, is the older kids that have been in Karma Closet last year, they'll bring in the new ones for the next year, or their friends, or the younger, sibling will come in. Yeah, and it tends to be like a couple of kids together. They don't tend to run on their own.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a social piece on that too, right? Where they want to have a little bit of fun with this project too, and they know they're doing something good for other people. So yeah, it's not curriculum based for my end, but it was as the initial idea. The Karma Yoga class, like the yoga class 4 years ago, took that on as a class project, but those kids are gone and graduated by now. So they're not even in this school anymore, but they still remain in contact with our like Facebook page and message us all the time about, oh my gosh, I can't believe how well you're doing now. And like, we just started with a small little project where we were putting out a few little, bars of granola bars, like in key areas like snacks. And now we're into breakfast program like Christiana is, and making things for lunch. And yeah, so yeah, it is definitely student led. They're getting some sort of intrinsic sort of there's a little bit of a necessity of like, I feel like I'm giving back, and they like that feeling. So yeah, I think that's all I'll say on that one.
Oops. Christiana, you're working with just slightly younger kids. What would you say about your experience?
We're still actually kind of in the building phase. This is actually, I started this February of last year. And so far I've only worked with 8th grade students, which has made it a little tricky to continue because our 8th graders move on to the high school. So there's sort of there hasn't been any continuation of people continuing in the program. So you kind of get them trained and then they're gone. But the goal would be, I started incorporating 7th graders this year to try and see like, okay, if I have some people who like understand the ins and outs of the program, like maybe next year they can come in and take up bigger leadership roles because they know how to do things. They know what the expectation is. So for now, like I do most of the planning, but for example, the breakfast burritos, I showed them how to make them. And now I just say, would you make breakfast burritos? And they're gone and they're done, right? They know what to do. They know where to put them in. And I'm trying to find, I had a student last year, and on the days that I was out, I didn't even write it in my supply plan. I just told the student, and she ran the program while I was out. So I haven't quite found that person yet this year, but they'll come in, they'll set up the front counter, they know where this goes. And even today I walked in at recess and I forgot we get a delivery on a Tuesday, and I forgot it was a Tuesday, and there were 5 kids in here putting everything in the fridge. They know where everything goes, they just took care of it. So like a piece of it is like showing them, we talk food safety, we talk kind of expectations, trying to get them to understand like, yeah, you can't leave yogurt on a cart for 3 hours and then still use it, like, going through those kinds of expectations. But I find they're just absorbing and listening all the time. And so I can kind of gradually be like, well, you can take care of that, right? You got this, you know where it is, you know what to do. And they love having those opportunities to just kind of take care of things for me. So
I wonder if Shali's comments about curriculum and getting this kind of connected to curriculum more, if that resonates with you, and if you've seen any particular successes or if you've got particular hopes in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest trick with sort of the curriculum combined piece is the number of students in a space working on the same thing. So when the cooking program that we offered during our school hours in the fall, I had 21 students. And so it took a while to kind of figure out how we were going to do it, but I ended up doing stations where they were responsible for different things and they would rotate through the stations. So, you're working with a protein this week while that group preps the applesauce, and that, because we try not to waste anything, even our old apples. So trying to kind of figure out how do you give everyone a role, and what happens when the kids finish and they're like, well, I'm done. And then they're in a corner, causing chaos. So that's always a piece that you have to figure out with middle schoolers in particular. But for example, I'm doing procedural writing in my grade 7 French class, and we are going to be cooking. For this round, I'm not getting them to cook necessarily for the food program, but the goal will kind of be build that capacity, and maybe next time that's what they're doing, right? They do it as a part of their class. And yeah, so there's room in there for those types of things. It's just sometimes you need an extra person, and so finding the extra person to help you supervise can be tricky, or figuring out, okay, well, what budget line is that food coming out of? And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that come into play, but it's all possible. So,
Karen, what about your colleagues? Do you see curriculum connections being made?
Yes, absolutely. So I teach yoga, as I mentioned earlier. So I've made a really good connection with our culinary arts teacher. So you can imagine they kind of have their own kitchen space like Christiana has. And so he's been instrumental this year in helping out with, the food preparation from his end. But like Christiana said, like he's got his own curriculum to teach. He's got his own courses to teach, his own students to watch and maintain. And then preparing food over and above that is sometimes, it's just sometimes tricky. Or Paul will say things like, oh, I have to get this, this, and this done this week, and I'll be able to make a batch of muffins for the breakfast program, but I'll put some in the freezer for next. Like, we're always continually planning ahead of time. So when we talk to our principal, this is actually a new thing that I didn't tell you guys about, but he's going to have some support time in September, because we know like the Karma Closet needs to keep expanding for food offerings. So he needs like a support block in his schedule every day. And so our principal is just doing staffing now. Like it's April, but we're planning for September. So Paul needs a block in his schedule every day where he doesn't have curriculum and instruction. It's just volunteers coming down with the Karma Closet, and they're doing like the muffin making, or they're doing the burritos, or they're doing a rice bowl or whatever, or prepping a salad bar, and that is the only way I think we can manage trying to feed the numbers that we do. Like, we're feeding probably 70 to 100 free meals a day. It's just, the commitment piece for one adult has to be there, every day on food production too, because otherwise we're serving a lot of prepackaged foods, which is not the ultimate goal. But through COVID, like, it was the only option we had. We went through so many Nutri-Grain bars that would make you ill, right? And they don't want to eat that stuff anymore either, right? They get kind of sick and tired of eating the same thing, but everything had to be prepackaged, and nobody's hands could be on anybody else's food. So we've stepped away from that this year, and more healthier, freshly prepared options. And that also comes with a cost. Like, we're going through, single-use bowls, and we moved away from styrofoam to paper bowls. And like, there's all of these things. Like, we'd love to have an industrial dishwasher and wash our own dishes. We would love that. We'd like one of those that, does it in 90 seconds. You bring the hood down, and it's like a restaurant. Do you know how expensive that equipment is? Like, we could do our own bowls, we could do our own forks and knives, and we could reduce our environmental impact. And we're talking about, a $15,000 piece of dishwasher equipment for a school. Like, is it reasonable? I don't know. All I know is there's a lot of garbage outside, and all of this stuff is all connected. And if we're moving to a way that is more sustainable around food, like, the kids will take responsibility for that. But there has got to be a huge commitment, I would say, not only on the provincial but the federal government, to say, like, this is a priority, and the kids are here in this space every single day, and we don't have a overarching plan for food for them while they're here. It's I think it's time. We have obviously teachers like Christiana who are passionate about school food, or else you wouldn't be doing this in your school day. And I just thank you so much, because I see the work that you're doing, and also Nourish Nova Scotia and Food for All in New Brunswick. Like, these conversations are happening in other, other places, like even the state of Maine to your south, like they just switched to a free food program too. I'm wondering how it's working for them, and the conversation is at least alive and well, and I'm hopeful like we're tipping over into a place where we can have more adults sort of like overseeing this rather than as an add-on to their jobs that they're doing. Like, a lot of my work is around food security right now as a program support teacher, and there are other pieces of my work that are falling away because I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta pay this $4,000 grocery bill this month, and I'm not kidding. Like, this is going up exponentially, and it cannot continue on an unsustainable level. And this is the reality in schools today, and that's just my school, right? Like,
yeah, and I know that we're going to get to it, or we were planning to get to it already later in the conversation. We are part of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, and we're disappointed that there wasn't a federal investment commitment to school food in this last federal budget, which means that we're continuing on in this current state where everybody recognizes the need, and yet it hasn't been resourced yet. And there isn't, at least in most parts of Canada, there isn't a system. There are amazing folks like yourselves and amazing initiatives that we can learn from and be inspired by. But there isn't yet like an across the board commitment. We are going to find ways of making this work, like Prince Edward Island has and did a couple of years ago. And I noticed that there's a comment from Caitlin McLean in the chat, asking about for yourselves as educators with many different responsibilities. You're driven by passion and supported by youth taking leadership and sharing the work. She asks if you have recommendations for getting the buy-in from other educators who may not have the passion that you both share. So why don't I let you answer that?
That's a tricky one. I live in my community. I have a 3-minute commute, and a lot of my coworkers commute a lot farther. And so for me, like, spending an hour after school washing dishes is possible because I can do that. I don't have to go quite as far. I don't have kids to pick up. Like, that's really been a piece of it. It's been hard to kind of get my coworkers support, other than if I ask someone to today I asked someone to cover a class for me, but no problem, done. We understand this is important. And, I have a supply teacher that comes in and she'll come and do the dishes, right? If she's in the building and she has free time. And so, but yeah, it's tougher, sort of, even the piece like the management piece that I do, it's not really something that can be divided up because somebody has to make sure the kitchen's clean to the right standard and that the fridges have been rotated properly and right. And you can't have multiple people doing that because something will get missed. So I've largely been doing this on my own, but my administration's great. Like, anytime I ask, they're like, no problem, we'll figure this out. And so, I guess I haven't had a lot of buy-in from the greater staff, other than they see the benefit to their students. So, and they'll bring me dirty dishes.
Well, and I guess, Karen, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in there too. I hear what you're saying, Christiana, like all of that. Yeah, I've been in that boat too. And I'm just going to go back to Caitlin's comment in the chat. And so in PEI, I'm reading, we provide healthy school lunches to 62 island schools, and we're striving to increase student engagement. So Caitlin, I guess my suggestion would be that, like Shali has said too around Uplift, like I think it does have to come from student-led design. And if you can get into the schools and meet with students that are really passionate about environmental concerns and school food, like they're in there, the kids are there and they care about these things. And I've found that if it comes from the students, then there's a whole lot less of resistance on the adults' part that support them. So we'll find some sort of support worker, or there'll be a teacher, or there'll be an admin or a support person resource. Somebody in the school will say, you know, I'll help you out with that. And the idea is that it has to start really small. We started really small. Like, yeah, can we do this like once a week? And can we do it twice a week? And once we figure out, okay, I've got all the pieces in place, I've got the support I need, I've got the administration that says, yes, we'll make it work. Because I've been getting the exact same message, Christiana, like I've never gotten a no ever from my administration. However, they're so overwhelmed, like they don't know where to start either. We've got the kids in our classroom who are going to be the change makers. So yeah, I think that is the key, is if Caitlin, if you can get into the schools and start to meet with some of these smaller groups of students, or even classes of students that are interested in doing food and food security, I think that might be the way to go. Yeah, Citizenship 9 or Social Studies 9 is a good way in. I think they have a curriculum component around food security. That would be a good contact. And I think when you have a big understanding of like curriculum, that there is a way to sneak your way into every grade level in any curriculum and use food as a segue in. It doesn't matter what you're teaching, like including math, for example. So it could be any teacher in the school who wants, maybe the carrot is, you know, like you're offering up a little $500 grant to run some sort of, you know, food security initiative in a school, and you'll get somebody bite, because money is sadly, you know, something that is not really available to us as teachers. Like, we don't have a huge budget. And if someone says, you know, you could have $500 to do this in your classroom as an activity, you'd be like, oh, all of a sudden you got resources? Like, oh my gosh, like we could do all kinds of stuff with that. And we can make a buck stretch. Like we could feed a lot of kids. So yeah, I would say it's got to be student-led, student design. That's my only.
I don't know. I'm thinking about what kind of drew my students in, and at middle school, the best time to catch them is the winter, because you know what 8th graders hate? Going outside. And so we find all these kids hiding in nooks and crannies in the school and be like, well, why don't you come help out with this? I need some help making muffins. I need some help washing a couple dishes. And even I've used it as a tool, sort of like, I need you to contribute positively to the school because your actions haven't been positive. And the number of kids that will come in and wash every single dish, when I say that to them, I'm like, oh, I meant like do like 10 dishes. No, they'll show up and wash everything. Right. And like, there's this framework of like, you're contributing positively to your school. And whenever, like when I started out, those first couple of lasagnas, I like walked into the kids. I was like, you fed your school. You did that. And the kind of the looks on their faces, they were like, oh, I did do that. I am the best kind of like moment of, yeah, they really, there's an avoidance piece. I don't want to go outside at recess. But then all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, this is something I can do instead. This is the time we have for this. Like I teach full time. So recess is when we do it. And well, and the other thing is, I'd say, oh, I need the muffins bagged. You can have a muffin if you bag all the muffins. And they're like, oh, yes. Like, yeah. So yeah, food is a huge motivator. Knowing they get first dibs on something really makes a difference too. So, yeah.
I wonder if I can invite Shali and Genevieve. Do either of you have questions that you want to ask, or like anything you want to just kind of contribute to the conversation amongst us around this student leadership?
I mean, I just want to take a moment to say that it's been so interesting to see. I've written down so many notes, and here in New Brunswick, we don't have a provincial school food policy yet. So it's great to be able to hear from other provinces that do and how that's managed. So it's really inspiring to hear that. Something that really stuck out from what Karen has shared is I love that the students seem to understand what food security means, which is the first time that I hear that from it shared that way. It's beautiful. Like Christiana, I love the way you say it as well, where it's that ownership and that partnership, and we did this. And that's something there too, but to have that understanding with it, and I think that encourages that continuation, because you can see it rippling out throughout your community even after you leave the school. So that's something really that I'm taking away from this, that I think is a beautiful way that we linked both of our provinces today. I think that's really like a good way to see that. And we did talk about our disappointment that the federal budget did not include a national universal school food policy. And Lisa, like you mentioned, we both our organizations do work with the Coalition for Healthy School Food. I'd be curious to know, or like, I'm such a dreamer, and I always like hearing what other people's dreams are. So like, if, let's say, like, I don't know, a big chunk of money falls from the sky, it doesn't need to come from anybody, what would be like, what would be the dream, and what would it be like, even with seeing as something that's student-led, where would the students like for it to see? Like when they talk about that, you know, when you're doing dishes and you're chatting with them, what is it that they would like to see? I'd really love to hear that part.
Christiana, I don't know about your kiddos, but mine, their big dream is just to have like no more school cafeteria where you got to pay for anything like that. They talk about that all the time, is the barrier piece. Like nothing worse for youth than to feel like they're stigmatized. So either you have a lot of money or you don't. And if everyone was able to even have some sort of choice in their school food, not like, here's the meal of the day, here's what you get, and if you don't have any money, too bad. Or worse, for teenagers, they go up the road to Dairy Queen, and then it's all, you know, fast food. They don't really want to eat that stuff, is what I hear in my circle from kids who meet on every, you know, in Monday morning meetings. Their big dream would be to have more plant-based food more often, and stuff that was homemade, like a homemade lasagna. They will pick that every single time over anything that's prepackaged or is, you know, coming from Cisco, which is our big, you know, food supplier. So they want to eat good food. They want to eat food that they know has been prepared, you know, maybe for them or by them. When they understand that they picked the, you know, the recipe of the day, and that was something that they take great pride in, like they know how to make, they can be taught how to make their own food. And that would be the overall dream, you know. And to have a big greenhouse on our rural school property. I'm now really dreaming big, you know, like we could do our own inside like hydroponic gardening. We can have our own salad production pretty much 10 months a year. Like we can provide for ourselves. Like we have the technology, we just don't have any sort of large scale seed money support for the output. Once we get all the equipment, we're good to go. That would be the dream. And you know, and support time for someone. It doesn't have to be a teacher, an adult in the building who's kind of got the overall picture of it all, because it's a gigantic responsibility. But we're just kind of piecing it together, doing our best. We're making it work. It's not great, right? It's good. It's really good, but it has potential to be extraordinary. Anyway, I'll just leave that there.
Yeah.
Christiana.
It's funny you talk about the cafeteria. One of the reasons why the program exists at my school is because our cafeteria service went away and didn't come back after COVID. So the room that I'm in right now is the cafeteria. It's my space. We took it over. They're not getting it back. We're not paying a company anymore for that nonsense. But I think the biggest dream for my students, like when we do a hot lunch once a week. So we get donations from the food bank, we do bagels, we do all these things, but once a week we do a hot lunch. And I have kids being like, is it grilled cheese day? Is it grilled cheese day? I'm like, no, guys, it's Wednesday. Like, I don't have time on Wednesday to make 120 grilled cheese. I was like, Friday, there'll be grilled cheese on Friday. Or, when are we going to have spaghetti again? I'm like, well, when you guys return the forks that you took and didn't give back, because I don't have enough forks right now to serve a meal, that's when we'll do spaghetti again, right? Like, and so like we're missing pieces. And so the kids want the hot lunch. Like, they line out the door and they want it. But yeah, it's that's a tough one because it's me and my prep period on Friday. And lunchtime with the other kids. We kind of build. They're like, okay, we've got to make 120 breakfast burritos. We've been working on that for a couple of weeks, and that's what we're going to serve this Friday. And right, and it's weeks of work at lunchtime, and so yeah, it takes a lot. But they would love hot lunch every day. I think that's their big dream. They would love that every day. Let's have hot lunch all the time. So yeah, but I can only do so much. So that's once a week.
Well, you're kind of, you got to where I was thinking about asking about, because our next webinar is about successes and lessons from cafeterias. And it sounds, Karen, like your work and the cafeteria's work are not integrated. Whereas Christiana, you've taken over, but you aren't resourced to fully provide cafeteria service in a very different way. And like another comment in the chat suggests, like, it's very exciting to think about the cafeteria as a potential learning space and as a resource for all kinds of youth leadership and development of food skills and food security for students while they are at school. Like, that is a very exciting vision. So I don't know if anybody wants to respond more to that, but yeah, the webinar that we have coming up will sort of talk about some steps in a direction towards that kind of a vision. But Karen, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about your relationship with the cafeteria, if at all.
Our school cafeteria is a catering society. So West Pictou Catering Society looks after our big high school, and then I think 3 or 4 of our feeder schools, like elementary and middle schools. So they pay for the staff that works in all of those schools. It is not for profit, but the smaller schools, they don't have enough generation of some sort of like enough money to keep their staff paid. So a lot of times the food that's actually served in our cafeteria for payment is overpriced. So, and some of that money goes to pay staff in other school sites. It's not ideal. Like I said, we're just kind of making it work, right? But the kids here at the high school will be like, oh, I just paid $6 for a wrap or a salad or something like that. And, I could go up the road to Dairy Queen and pay $1 more and I can get the full meal deal, right? And so there's that part, and it's all coming down to money and choices. And if healthy food was just available for free, they would eat it, right? They're teenagers, they're going to eat free food if it's yummy, and they'll eat anything that's not nailed down, right? So with our school cafeteria partnership, we do actually work pretty closely with our school cafeteria, and we had to over COVID for food handling and food safety, like Christiana said. So they were food trained, and everything that they made for us, we actually had to buy at a reduced price. So we were buying muffins, and we were buying, you know, breakfast sandwiches and the breakfast burritos like you were making on your own, Christiana. Like, part of our budget money was going to buy those ingredients to make that. And the ladies in the cafeteria were helping us out, you know, trying to feed the hungry ones. So nobody was, you know, obviously going without food all day. So we've always known, you know, that there's a percentage of the population that needs extremely, needs that food security piece. And we've done that for, you know, as long as I've been teaching, which is 26 years, you know, the ones that need to have the free lunch. Now to do it in a way that is accessible and barrier free for everyone, to eliminate the stigma, that was student-led design. That was from their end. They don't want to feel like they stick out from their friends. So if food was available for everyone for free, that would be better. You just listen to what they're saying. They'll give you the direction where to go. Like, they're the ones that want the salad bar. That wasn't my idea. They're like, wouldn't it be great if we had salads every day, Miss B? I'm like, yeah, it'd be amazing. Like, I'd like to have a salad bar here at school too, rather than, you know, French fries out of the oven. Like, oh, right, again? Like, come on. So they just want to have a little bit of choice in their food choices, what they put on their plate too. So
we have just a few minutes left. Shali, did you have a last comment, question, contribution, reflection that you wanted to share?
My reflection is just gratitude. I think I love all the big dreamers on the call, and not just dreamers, but workers. Like, everyone's dreaming big and working so hard to meet those dreams. And it gives me hope that, like, it's sad that the system isn't ready for, like, people are kind of swimming up the stream here, but all the pieces are there. Like, we look at the people on the call and what people are doing with so little. Like, we don't have to question. Kids are interested and kids are capable. So, like, all those pieces are there. I love the thought of the cafeteria as a classroom. Like, it shouldn't be a separate entity within the school. Like, look what Christiana is pulling off. Like, it's all the pieces are there, and I really am hopeful that we're on the edge of huge shift. And so that's, I guess, my reflection is gratitude for everybody.
Thanks, Shali. And thank you, Christiana and Karen and Genevieve and everybody who's been part of the conversation. It's been really, really rich. And a recording will be available on our YouTube channel. And please follow all the brilliant folks that have contributed to this, and be sure to tune in and register to, you know, get the link to our next webinar, which is going to feature Jenny Osborne, who you saw just put a comment in the chat. She co-authored the local food lunch toolkit, which we're using to do some professional development now for cafeteria workers. Yeah, I love this idea, cafeteria as a classroom. I think that's like a next whole area of work and exploration, and best models to explore and build together. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Congratulations on your work. It's really inspiring.
thanks for inviting us.